Hi, I'm Natasha Senjanovic, and this is Women Like Sex, a myth-busting podcast that examines the many, many medical, scientific, and social facts about female sexuality that were never, in fact, facts. Especially the very modern-day belief that women don't like sex as much as men do. I'll be speaking with experts, educators, friends, comedians, and more across a spectrum of ages, genders, and cultures to flip the scripts on myths and misconceptions that have long been dictated by not women. Together, we'll replace so much inaccurate messaging with healthier, smarter, factual facts and get the sex ed we wished we'd gotten. Welcome to the very first episode of Women Like Sex. To dismantle the seemingly endless myths about female sexuality, we first have to understand correct biology and anatomy. And my first guest is a medical trailblazer, to put it mildly. Dr. Helen O'Connell is Australia's first female urologist and probably best known for publishing the first paper to posit the correct anatomy of the clitoris in 1998. Yes, not 1898 or 1798, 1998, which in some ways makes TV's Friends older than the anatomically correct clitoris. O'Connell couldn't prove her research until 2005, thanks to MRI improvements. Her many accolades include being a pioneer in urology research and treatment for women and men. A link to her site and a transcript of our conversation can be found on the episodes page of womenlikesex.com, episode 1. There, you can also see pictures of the clitoris and anatomical elements that she mentions, as well as the comrade in arms and reclining clitorises that I mention. A couple of quick notes. This interview was recorded a couple of years ago when I still lived in Nashville and had every intention of launching the podcast then, but a career move put that on hold for a while. There is one correction. The woman cited as the editor-in-chief of the Australian and New Zealand Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology, Caroline DaCosta, is no longer in that position. Otherwise, I'm assured all the other information still stands, which is great, because the interview was a delight. I also mentioned that in 2019, Amazon offered up mostly dildos and dolls when I tried to buy a clitoris model. Over the years, that had changed, and for a while, the site sold all kinds of clit-shaped items, from jewelry to cookie cutters. But currently, in the spring of 2025, an Amazon search for, quote, anatomically correct clitoris offers up nothing except a message to check my spelling. Meanwhile, there are pages of anatomically correct penises. When I did a generic clitoris search on Amazon, it offered up lots of sex toys, including penis-shaped ones, and only a few results for the model itself. It's no wonder, then, that most women can't recognize their own sexual organ. You'll hear examples of that in this episode. Last but not least, Microsoft Word's transcription of the interview had no problem spelling out penis and vagina and even clitoral, but the word clitoris itself was redacted every time with 8 little stars, just like a curse word. We have come a long way, but have so much farther to go, which is the very reason for this project. So let's begin. I'm very, very excited to speak to you today.
Thank you.
Have you become used to the excitement and awe that you inspire in certain people?
It's an interesting journey. So I'm a really busy clinician and I have quite a few hats. I was recently head of department and I let that go because I was elected as the president of the Urology Surgeons of Australia and New Zealand. So the anatomy story is something that has sort of paralleled my surgical career, if you like. I think the 20th anniversary, Melissa Fife wrote this amazing article for which she won 2 literary awards. So it sort of brought it into a new era. And maybe, at the same time, my kids were old enough that I was in a new phase as well, able to give it a bit more brain space, because being a surgeon takes up a lot of brain space. So there's been renewed interest and quite a lot of documentaries. There's also really amazing collaborations happening. There's a doctor based in Adelaide in Australia, E. Mulligan, who's been instrumental in making models, and her story on these models is pretty interesting, but I partnered with them to make them as accurate as possible. There's an amazing gynecologist, Jasmine Abdul Kadir. There's a lot of incredible kind of stuff in the realm of anatomy, but also education happening. So it's definitely a moment in time where there's an appetite and an awareness that's pretty exciting.
I know that you've talked about this often. How you got interested in urology when you were in medical school? What was the light bulb moment?
So I went into medicine. Actually, as a high school student, I wanted to be a psychiatrist. I didn't have much interest or faith in pharmaceuticals. So I thought that talking therapy was sort of the path. Also, Mum used to admire my hands, and she'd say, "You're going to do something great with those hands one day." And so I, as an intern, had a job doing dermatology, and I'd sort of go around the hospital taking little biopsies and suturing them, and I really felt the practical aspect was really important. In the US, it's a bit different. You're probably more inclined to make your intention of a career during medical school. We were much younger. And then the director of surgery said, don't even look at general surgery, look at the specialties. So I looked at the specialties. I chose to do as a second-year resident urology, and I'm in the clinic, and this woman, a patient, says to me, "Oh my God, it's so great to speak to a woman." And I thought, wow, look at that. It's not just me wanting to do something. I can actually value add. Female patients can relate to their doctor at a different level than if they've only got men as a go-to. And then I just loved urology. It was a great specialty.
I've read about the infamous anatomy book.
It deserves solid criticism.
Was that Grey's Anatomy?
No. So we all had a copy of Grey's Anatomy, which was sort of a bit heavy to carry around, and it deserves severe kind of censure as well. At least it had something where Last really was just, there was just a lot written about the penis and quite a lot about the uterus, but pretty much nothing about the clitoris. Well, I hated anatomy for a start. I couldn't actually understand why I hated it, but I didn't like being a medical student particularly either. But the content of anatomy, or maybe the blokiness, I don't know. I just always felt uncomfortable in some way. But then as a young surgeon in training, we had to stick with this book. And I started early, but I took a long time to get through this exam that required basically memorising this book. I really do think that the fact that I had to stick with the thing for so long, I just got crosser and crosser every time I read it. I could see just how sexist it was. Frankly, it wasn't good enough.
What I've heard you say about that is that, in general, female genitalia was described as either a failure of certain aspects of male genital formation or a modification.
And it was also an afterword. So you'd have this very thorough account of the male structure as though male humans are normal. And then you get this addendum of what was going on in women as though we're some sort of add-on. It's sort of like the rib kind of concept, isn't it?
What strikes me with that is how, medical literature, how people in medicine could believe that, because if everybody's supposed to be male,
yeah,
if they're the baseline and normal and we're abnormal, how does humanity even exist?
It's sort of unthinkable from a logic standpoint, but I do think medicine's a sort of reflector of society, and it probably shows the extent to which the learned men of medicine related or had empathy for women. And the people doing anatomy, you'd have to say, for the most part, that relatedness or empathy was incredibly low.
That's putting it very generously.
Well, I mean, it is interesting because, the men had done the anatomy because women were stuck in homes bearing children because there's no contraception and were sort of barred from education even if they had the opportunity through wealth or good fortune. So there are some exceptions, so there were some beautiful descriptions and, they're in the literature. But when you start to study something, when you can't trust what the trusted book is, you have to then look at what is so, study it, and that takes, working out a system of how you're going to actually do the dissections takes a bit, because you've got to make sure that you do no harm to the body, and you have to sort of look at it from all different angles to really understand what you've got. And dissection is a process whereby you remove structures. Well, that's a judgment. You have to make decisions about what you're going to remove, in what order, what you're going to keep, what bony structures or anything that will hold it together. Because as soon as you take one structure away, you potentially, make the whole thing unstable. At any rate, well, once I'd done enough, and I'm simultaneously, because this was my doctorate, reviewing the literature, the current literature, and then the historical literature, we found some pretty good descriptions.
Of the clitoris?
Yeah, that had been there from the 17th century onwards.
So there are studies. There was interest in the 17th century and the 18th century, and then it disappeared.
That's really interesting, isn't it? That the cultural aspect is so strong that it's as though it doesn't exist in the world. But there's also this thing where, anatomy, because it's research science, I know research scientists don't like the idea of basic science as a concept, but because it's an essential science that's stable and it's been done, there's an assumption that it's completely been done. There's nothing else to ask questions about.
What was technology like in the 90s when you were looking?
We had digital photography. Photography's at a whole new level now, but it's not light years of difference. I never hankered for technology. I'd go to presentations which were super high-tech. It felt like we were pulling the atom apart. Nanotechnology was being talked about. And I'd be thinking, this is crazy. The basics of female anatomy, you don't know. And that is as basic as, potentially a photograph. You don't understand what you're looking at. And yet we're doing this amazing stuff over here with immunofluorescence. So I don't think the technology was ever a barrier. Having said that, when I went to do the MRI study, they were films, like old-fashioned radiographs. We couldn't just kind of blow everything up like you can now. I shouldn't say the word blow up, but expand, magnify. And it wasn't until, I think it was 2003, that all of a sudden you could digitise things enough to put them on a floppy disk so that you could send it.
Was it something that you wanted to do because the information wasn't there, or was it that and a combination of when you were looking at other organs as part of your work that you suddenly started realizing, well, hold on, maybe the underground and above ground of what is the entire clitoris were actually connected? What was the light bulb moment there?
This aspect of science was deeply flawed. I couldn't trust it. There was such a dominance of this pejorative language that, I just thought there is nothing here that makes me trust this work. As little young doctors in training, we weren't expected to just be receptacles of information. They were encouraging us with the new curriculum to see how knowledge was constructed and to be part of that future. So I could see that the way this had been put together had to be faulty because the thinking behind it was faulty. It had to be faulty that it was missing. That was just appalling. And by this stage, I'm like 25, happily married. It's just, I know what's going on down there from the inside. This is rubbish. The book was rubbish. This aspect of the book was rubbish. There was a problem with anatomy generally. It wasn't just this book, because Gray's, which purported to be kind of the end game, the Bible, was not that far from this other blokey rubbish. And I'd paid a fortune, As a medical student, I paid I paid, I don't know, 500 for it back in 80 something. And it says that the clitoris differs from the penis in being unrelated to the urethra. Well, that's just wrong. It says that the dorsal clitoral nerve follows the same pathway but is just a very small nerve. Absolute rubbish. It's not a very small nerve. It's a very large nerve. And how dare they not describe the pathway? Just bad, bad, bad science.
Is it one of the largest nerves? Are they among the largest nerves in the body? Is that correct?
Oh, look, comparisons are odious. They're big nerves. You don't have to get a microscope out. They're just sitting there, big nerves throughout the female life cycle. So I think as a young medical scientist, if you like, or a young doctor and researcher, I was just incensed at how bad the science was. We could do better, and we should do better.
And you did do better.
And how did a non-scientist have half a hope of understanding what was going on if people at the level of anatomy, which is supposed to be, something you can really trust, is not trustworthy?
What is the biological purpose of the clitoris?
So the penis has the urethra running through it. But the idea that it's just a receptacle for the urethra is ridiculous. Its main job is a bit like the clitoris. It is the organ that, when stimulated, generally speaking, at a physical level, gets the brain to the point where it orgasms. Orgasm is a bodily function of the brain. It's this kind of pelvic brain interface that not only gives a pleasurable feeling, but following orgasm, there is release, a drop in physical tension, improved sleep, because generally speaking, you're getting two people together, though obviously not always, but often it occurs in a partnership. Because the pleasure is shared, it enhances the partnership. There are so many things to this that are beyond. It's like you're going to the fair, on a joyride, and you're eating, we call it fairy floss, you call it
cotton candy.
It's as though you're degrading the value of all of this human experience that is way beyond cotton candy. Cotton candy's good. Nothing wrong with cotton candy. It is more than cotton candy.
I was listening to somebody talk about how, because clitoral stimulation is so important, that foreplay is important. And I was struck by, for the longest time, sexologists and sociologists have defined sex as P and V, the penis and vagina, and the charts are stimulation plus ejaculation. I mean, there's literally the chart that, it kind of steeps up and then ejaculation and then you're done. Again, the baseline is male. Should we even be calling it foreplay?
Yeah, that's some peripheral thing over there, and the real deal is him getting his rocks off.
Considering what you've done to turn our perceptions of anatomy on their head, how do you think we should be defining sex? If it's not, the main event is, like you said, not him getting his rocks off, but something that is about mutual pleasure.
It could be self-stimulation, or, let's just talk about partner, because I think the main focus of your question is on partner interactions.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
There is a moment where it's on with the partnership. There's two people who have an end game, at the very least, mutual pleasure, love, enhancement, physical sharing of the body. From my perspective, it's on when two people have decided that it's on. The idea that that it's only on when he penetrates her is amazingly kind of limited, isn't it? It's sort of a like a dinner party where you say, oh, well, it's only when the meat is served. It's a bad pun, isn't it? Let's say it's only when the dessert comes out that it's a dinner party. Is it ludicrous? And, in that paradigm, it's only when she's holding him internally that it counts. Well, what? No. We know the probability of if you went from 0 just to penetration with nothing in between, no appetizer and, no main course, the chances of her having pleasure, it's just all in the realm of sacrifice, isn't it? She's not going to have pleasure.
Right.
How's this going to be anything except a dead end? If she's not enjoying it, there's going to be a point where it's so lacking for her that, especially, by the time children come along and it's just all too difficult, it's a hopeless case. And we see this across the world, don't we?
Yeah.
Women just give up. Men, get to the point of begging. It's just appalling. Generally, they don't miss out sexually. They just miss out because they get deprived of love and affection.
They end up with a partner who doesn't want to have sex with them because they're not getting anything out of it.
They're not getting anything out of it. What a terrible paradigm.
Speaking of getting things out of it, for over a century now, I guess 100 and something years, there's been the back and forth between clitoral versus vaginal orgasms, and one being the clitoral being immature, which is the Freudian. What in the name of all that is holy is an immature orgasm? When I first heard it, I just remember being floored and thinking, first I thought it meant like in very young children.
No, just another pejorative on female sexuality. It's really interesting, isn't it, that there's an organ misunderstood in its dimensions, if you like. Because as listeners, I've got to kind of explain it, but on either side of the bottom end of the vagina, deep to the labia. So you've got to kind of start to imagine or even feel where that is on your body. The clitoris extends backwards from, so you know where the clitoral glands is because it's so sensitive, but the rest of the organ passes in the direction of your backside. It's actually kind of on either side of the bottom end of the vagina. And it's also going around in a horseshoe-shaped fashion around the urine passage, the urethra. So in the anterior vaginal wall or the front wall of the vagina, the clitoris is not too far away. The top end of it is on the other side of the urine passage. And on either side of the urine passage, which is also kind of part of the vagina. So the three organs at that point are all interrelated. And it's a matter of judgment. What's clitoris, what's vagina, and what's urethra?
Mm-hmm.
In an article we wrote called Towards Unity, the Anatomy of the Distal Vagina. Distal means the bottom end of the vagina. There is this relationship, and you could call it we called it the clitoral complex, just to kind of help people understand that it's more than just the spongy tissue, and it's obviously more than and just that highly sensitive area that people are familiar with. It's not like the vagina has no part in female pleasure. It's just the idea that you somehow bypass the clitoris in order to help your partner to orgasm is the problem. That is the error in thinking. And it must be much more pleasurable for a male partner or a female partner for all of that to be active rather than still asleep and actually shut down rather than being alive and active and enjoying it.
You mean the organ itself shut down?
Yeah. Well, it's not just that. It's just the whole area, the lubrication that comes as part of that. The swelling, the way it looks, the way it feels on the inside to your partner is different than if someone's rigid and when you're going to stop. How's that going to feel? Terrible.
I'm ashamed to admit that I did not know what a clitoris looked like until 2019 when I was interviewing Dr. Alexandra Solomon, who was one of the people that inspired this project when she mentioned that the clitoris is the only human organ known to exist solely for pleasure. And I was floored. I acknowledge my ignorance, and this is one of the reasons that I want to do this is I want to learn as well. But when I looked up the clitoris and I thought, oh my God, I could not pick this out in a lineup. Like most humans from a very young age, I know what a penis looks like. And I live in Nashville, which is a bachelorette party destination. And so you walk around downtown and you see young women with penis-shaped hats and balloons and straws, and you can get penis-shaped popsicles.
Oh, wow. Can't get a clitoral shaped one.
I know.
There's a market there.
A few weeks ago, I was gathered with some friends who are writers, journalists like myself. They're authors, all women, I would say, well to highly educated. And I whipped out my little clitoris model, which I got on Etsy, which I could not even get on Amazon in 2019. I had to get, when I looked it up, anatomically correct clitoris, Amazon, all it showed me was dildos or dolls of those life-size babies that you can practice being a parent on.
Oh my God.
When I brought out the clitoris, this is what they said. I'm sure you've heard a lot of these things before. Okay, does anybody know what this is?
No, but is it sexual?
It's something that is inserted somewhere.
Definitely a feminine
No.
object.
It's not.
Also, it looks like a wishbone in a weird way.
It worse.
Is it a good luck charm?
An art object?
No, but that's something that people have often asked.
Does it have something to do with fertility?
Yes and no.
Yeah.
It's making me cross my legs.
An original dildo?
An original dildo?
Yeah. Or is it contraception?
So it looks like an IUD in a weird way.
Yeah.
Chicken waddle, a chicken neck thing, or like some part of a vibrator. I mean, I don't really know.
I guess sex toy, but I'm not sure for what.
A mini sculpture. I don't want to insult anyone's creative enterprise.
It's a human organ.
Is it actually a clitoris?
It is.
Okay, well, one doesn't
way
see a
off.
clitoris divorced from its body, so
But if you saw a penis divorced from a body, a model, you would know what it is.
I don't really know which way is up.
If you turn it around, that's the back. This is what is outside. Everything else is under the skin.
Makes sense.
Wow.
The heartbreaking thing is that I've also shown it to doctors who have not known what it is.
Wow.
My partner's, my boyfriend's brother-in-law is a cardiologist. He's going to hate me for calling him out on this, but when I showed it to him, he's like, oh, is it a hook?
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting. Caroline DaCosta is the editor of the Australian and New Zealand Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology. And she wrote to me asking me would I be interested in writing an editorial. As the editor, she had noticed that there were just almost no articles about the clitoris over her. I think she's been the editor for over 10 years, maybe longer. And she was very interested in what was going on. And so we actually did a literature search, and what she was saying was absolutely right. There was almost nothing. The articles that were written were about FGM or some sort of reversal procedure for genital mutilation. And, the whole story about genital mutilation, that's another level, isn't it? But somebody in the US had coined the term critical clitoridectomy. This is where you don't actually have it removed. You just have all knowledge of it removed. You're actually completely unaware of what is going on in your body. And so cliteracy is kind of the movement to start addressing this shocking thing that's been done to women's brains and men's, where a body part, through no fault of its own, has been given just a terrible run, a terrible life, a shocking existence, traumatized, forgotten, maimed in so many different ways, blamed for epilepsy and all these conditions completely unrelated to the clitoris. It's just an amazing history. It's so bad. You couldn't even imagine how human beings could make something like this happen. And then your intelligent friends don't even know that they've got they don't even know what it looks like. No idea.
I don't want to throw them under the bus without admitting that I didn't know either. I set out to do a project called Women Like Sex, and I didn't know what I didn't know.
Yeah.
I didn't know the extent of what I didn't know. I didn't know how wrong what we think we know is.
Yeah, yeah.
I like how you put in, I think, one of the articles on you, when you mentioned the intellectual and surgical removal of the clitoris. And like you said, it's disappeared from society. And at the same time, it's the cause of so many problems.
Elizabeth Sheehan said, and yet lurking in its substance is the greatest threat to female welfare ever known. You know, it's just, you've got to damage it in some way, but if you've got a normal one, it's completely useless. Like, what?
There's a direct parallel to just female sexuality in general. This idea, it's invisible, it doesn't exist.
Yes.
Boys are taught that if they are masculine, they're meant to be hypersexual. And
Yeah.
girls, if they're feminine, then they're going to not admit to liking sex. They're not even going to like it, much less admit to it, except for perhaps with one partner at a time, your husband or your boyfriend, you know, a male partner.
You know, because of marketing and social media and don't get started on the porn industry, the money being made on images and, you know, the focus on sex is more crazy than ever, you know, is actually heightened. But it's all of this, you know, the quality and the reality of that stuff that's being pushed to drive products and sales is just so poor from the point of view of probability of women having a healthy experience with their partner, and probably puts us further from where everyone, if you gave them a choice, wants to be.
It just keeps perpetuating myths that do damage to women and men.
Oh, yeah. The whole tendency for young women to, you know, as if they aren't beautiful enough, now they've got to go and remove every hair that's, you know, and then this whole genital surgery thing, so they're potentially getting damage to their genitals early on, just a new form of genital mutilation because they're being fed so much misinformation.
Is that something that you come across in your work?
I don't get asked that often, but GP colleagues do a lot. But I have been asked, you know, and I always make a point of telling people that they look normal, just because it's like an opportunity to reinforce, and even if they haven't asked it, I'll volunteer that they look normal just so they know they look normal. I mean, I won't lie. If it doesn't look normal, I won't. But if everything looks normal, I will say it's great.
I guess I was naive to think maybe in my 20s or 30s that we were moving towards an era of greater acceptance.
Look, we probably are. It's hard to know, isn't it? The fact that we've got these models is so great, isn't it? Like, it's a different conversation.
Speaking of Etsy,
Oh, hilarious.
I bought them from Etsy from a Swiss artist. One is a clitoris. It's a little 3D printed model of a clitoris holding up what would be one of the crura, but as an arm with a fist up in the air, and the other is a clitoris reclining on the beach.
And so relaxed. Oh, amazing.
Thank you so much for talking to me, and thank you for your work.
It was a pleasure, Natasha. Keep up the good work.
That delightful chuckle belongs to Helen O'Connell, Australia's first female urologist and author of the first paper to prove the correct anatomy of the clitoris. Women Like Sex is a flipped script production. It is executive produced and edited by me, Natasha Senjanovic. Website design and artwork is by Ted Nunes. Edesio Martinez is associate producer. Vic Vinayak assisted on mixing and editing. For more information, for episodes and swag, or to subscribe to the podcast or Patreon, please visit womenlikesex.com or the Women Like Sex YouTube channel. Thank you for listening. This is Women Like Sex. Pass it on.